supplies around the house. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use wood screws the correct way. I'll show and explain how to do clearance holes, pilot holes, and show you how to use the correct size drill bit and screw for the job in hand. So a common beginner's mistake, you want to screw this piece of wood into this piece of wood. So we place the wood on top, we get this screw and drive it through. And you can see there that by driving the screw straight through with no hole, the screw has acted as a wedge and it has split the wood in two. And this is especially common when screwing through hardwood. You'll also notice that the screw has come straight out the other side of the bottom piece of wood because we didn't select the right length screw to start with. And just to make another quick point, I'm going to drive a screw straight through two pieces of softwood. And if we remove the screw, you see that it is now tightly stuck in the top piece of wood, when actually it should slide through there quite freely. So how do we get around this problem? We need to use what's called clearance holes and pilot holes. So this here is an example of two pilot holes in the top and bottom piece of wood, and it is drilled to the width of the centre of the screw, and then the threads can bite into the piece of wood either side, pulling the two pieces of wood together. So the screw would be driven down that way, pulling this piece of wood up to that piece of wood. Now here's an example of a clearance hole on the top piece of wood and a pilot hole on the bottom piece of wood. So the hole on the top is drilled with a larger drill bit. And in this example we've got a slightly thinner screw, and the clearance hole allows this screw to pass freely through the top piece of wood, and then when it enters the smaller hole in the bottom piece of wood it begins to bite, and as it's driven down it pulls this piece of wood tight to the top piece of wood. And this is used more commonly where the top piece of wood with the clearance hole is a hardwood and we don't want the thread of the screw biting into that piece of wood and causing any unwanted resistance. So pilot holes and clearance holes are quite important for a number of reasons. Firstly, they stop wood splitting as the screw is no longer acting as a wedge. They can stop screws shearing or breaking when you're driving into a very hard bit of wood. And they allow two pieces of wood to be pulled together with a much cleaner, firmer joint. Using screws in softwood, there is no need to do a clearance hole in the top piece of wood because the wood is soft enough that the screw will go through it no problem at all. We need to create a pilot hole through both pieces of timber, and the hole you drill should basically be the width of the main shaft of the screw, up the middle, not the full width of the screw including the thread. This way the centre of the screw can easily pass through the wood and the thread is left to bite into the wood, pulling them together nice and firmly. First of all, we need to choose the correct screw. Now, as you saw in my poor example earlier, the screw went straight through both pieces of wood sticking out the other end, which is no good. So for this example, I'm going to use this screw here. So if you look at this screw, when it's driven in, the head will be flush with this piece of wood, and you'll see that the bottom of the screw will be almost 3/4 into the other piece of wood, which is perfect. You don't want it coming out the other end. Now we've got the right length screw, we need to select the right size drill bit for our pilot hole. So what you're looking to do is find a drill bit that is the same width as the bit down the middle of the screw. So just work your way through all your drill bits until you find one suitable for the screw that you're using. Now for this screw, I've just taken a few drill bits and held them up to the screw, and I found that the 3mm drill bit appears to be the best. And you can see when you place the drill bit in front of the screw, it covers the width of the shank down the middle, and you're left with the thread sticking out either side, and that's exactly what you're after. So assuming this is the position you want your two pieces of wood in, we'll just place the drill bit into the drill, and we'll go through both pieces of wood, drilling the pilot hole. And it's a good idea to extend the drill bit to the same length as the screw. That way you're not going to drill a hole unnecessarily deep. So just pull your drill bit out until it meets the length of the screw. And tighten up. Mark the position where you want to put your screw. So now we've got our pilot hole through both pieces of wood. The screw should drive in really easily. Another important thing to remember is always use the correct driver bit for the screw. For example, this is a posi drive and this is a posi drive, so they both go together. If you've got a Phillips screw head, you're going to need a Phillips bit for your driver, but I'll explain this more in another video. And there you go. And you can see on the underside the screw hasn't come out, and on this particular screw with softwood it will drive itself in flush with the top of the wood. If you're using a tougher piece of softwood or a hardwood, you may need to use a countersink in order for the top of your screw head to sit flush with the top of the wood. And I'll show you how to do a countersink later in the video. You'll also see when you've got a pilot hole that the screw will be removed a lot easier than we saw earlier. As you you can see there, it came straight out without tearing into this piece of wood. So if you need to remove it for any reason, it's a lot easier and you're left with a nice neat hole between the two. Just to show you with the screw out, that's the top piece of wood and there's the underside. It's a nice small hole. When the screw goes into the second piece of wood, the shank goes down it nicely, but the thread just bites into that piece of wood, and even with only a few turns with my hand, that screw is in there absolutely solid. When we're using hardwood, the wood is less forgiving, and for that reason we need to do a clearance hole in the top piece of wood, which is the full width of both the shank and the thread on the screw. Let's use this as the example. We're going to screw this piece of wood onto this piece of wood. So we're going to do a clearance hole in this piece of wood, and we're going to drill a pilot hole in this piece of wood. So again, we need to select a screw that's not going to stick out of the bottom. So we'll choose this one, and we'll do the pilot hole first of all through both pieces of wood. So like last time, we need to find a drill bit that is the same width as the centre of the screw, not including the threads. I'm going to select this one as I can still see the threads sticking out either side. Just like last time, drill the hole straight through both pieces of wood. So now we're going to do the clearance hole in the top piece of wood, and in order to do the clearance hole I need to choose a drill bit that is the same width as the hole of the screw, including the centre and the thread. So I'm going to choose that one. Now another tip here for you. If you're doing some intricate work like cabinet making, you may well have these two pieces of wood clamped together, and this would avoid the pieces of wood moving away from each other, keeping the two holes lined up with each other. In this scenario, you only want your larger clearance hole through this top piece of wood. So what I would do is take your drill bit, hold it up next to the piece of wood. So hold your drill bit down, mark the depth of the wood with your thumb, like that. Then at the point you mark the depth of the piece of wood, wrap your piece of insulation tape around your drill bit. And you now know to only drill to the depth of the bottom of that insulation tape, and that will prevent you from drilling the larger hole into the piece of wood underneath. So holding the piece of wood together, gently drill, and then we stop at the base of the insulation tape. We now have our clearance hole in the top piece of wood. Just to show you quickly, this is the top piece of wood with the clearance hole, and with the clearance hole the screw goes through there freely with no resistance at all. And then here is the pilot hole where the screw won't pass through there freely, but when you turn it the thread will bite and it will pull into there, pulling the top piece of wood in nice and tight. Now here demonstrates another point, and you can see there that's raised and it won't go in any further. When you're using a harder piece of wood on top, quite often it will be so hard that the head of the screw won't push down into the wood on its own. So in this situation we'll have to put in a little countersink, and I'll show you how to do that now. That's your countersink tool. There are different countersink tools on the market. Some of them are incorporated into the drill bits themselves. It's just a matter of preference or cost. And that just slots into the driver the same as any other bit, like that. You just place the countersink on the top of the hole and push with a bit of pressure, and that will give you a nice little countersink in the top there for your screw head. So try again, and you can see the screw head is now flush with the top of the piece of wood. Now I'll be honest, there are examples where I wouldn't use a pilot hole in the bottom piece of wood, and a good example of this is like when doing a fence. If you did that, it would take you forever and a day. So let's say where I'm putting this piece of 2x3 into a fence post, I would do a pilot hole through this piece of 2x3, but I wouldn't bother putting one into this fence post because the fence post is big enough and the wood is soft enough that it's highly unlikely to split. Often it's easier to drill a hole through this piece of wood on the floor, then offer it up to the fence where you want it and just drive the screw straight through. It's always worth remembering there's a massive range of screws on the market today, and they're all designed for a range of different things. So it's not always essential to do a pilot hole or a clearance hole on everything you're doing, but it is useful for the majority of woodworking products unless you've got a screw that is designed specifically to eliminate any of these techniques. For more DIY, how-to, household tips and product review, please watch my other videos and don't forget to subscribe. I've been POUSE around the house. Ta-ta, farewell.